Out of the people I've talked to and the videos I've watched, it seems like a lot of people either love or hate Sony, and there's not really that much of an in-between. Today I'm going to discuss why this is. Hello, I'm Noah from Anything Cameras, the channel that focuses on helping you improve your filming and photography. Just the other month, I switched from a Canon platform to a Sony platform. And not only was I switching sensor sizes from APS-C to full frame, see that video in the cards above, but I was also completely switching brands and lens lineups. And in my research, I saw a lot of different opinions about different brands, especially Canon and Sony, as those were the main two brands I was looking at. And as I mentioned, it seems like a lot of people either love or hate Sony, and I think they have good reason. Let me start off with why you might love Sony. Their camera value is really, really good. My A7R III, which is a very top-of-the-line camera, even if it is the last generation, used only cost me $2,200. But this is a professional camera. Last generation, it was their second to best camera, and many professional portrait photographers and other types of photographers still use this camera. That is a really good deal. Whereas something like the Canon 5D Mark IV, which is not only a few years old, but also a DSLR, when it came out, it was $3,700, which is $300 more than the Sony A7R III's launch price, and in my opinion, doesn't have as good specs. There's also the fact that Sony has really good dynamic range and low light performance. Somehow they have, in my opinion, outperformed all the competition in this field. On my Sony A7R III, despite it being 43 megapixels, I can push the ISO up to 10,000, and still with some clever post-processing noise reduction, it's a usable image. And the dynamic range, in some scenarios, I can push the shadows up to 100, and it looks like there's full detail there. There's also the fact that Sony is all mirrorless. Mirrorless cameras are the future, and you can see that because everyone is going mirrorless. Canon and Nikon, just a little over a year ago, almost completely switched from DSLR to mirrorless. But Sony has been in the game for several more years, and therefore has had much more time to develop their line, their technology, and eke out the best bang for your buck, and just tune up their cameras as more and more generations have come out, fixing things based on user feedback. And then there are little things, like the fact that almost all the buttons on your Sony camera are programmable. You can set almost any button to whatever function you want. And then there's the autofocus. Everyone has heard about Sony's iDetect autofocus. It is super good. I recently just did about a 2-hour shoot with a friend using iDetection and autofocus at 85mm f1.4, so the depth of field was really shallow, but there were very few shots that were out of focus. I have continually been impressed, especially coming off a Canon DSLR, about how good Sony's autofocus is. It tracks well, it's quick, and even their video autofocus, even if it's crippled a little bit, is usually pretty dang good. So why would you hate Sony? Before I continue, don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell icon so you get notified anytime we post a new video. Well, in a nutshell, the video side of things, in a lot of their cameras, at least the full frame ones, have been crippled really horribly. The data rates are slow, often only going up to 100 megabytes a second, like in the A7 III, the A7R III, A7R IV, A9, A9 II, and I think the only Sony full-frame camera to go past that is the A7S II. And the video is just kind of bad overall. It looks good for what you get, but you're really limited in the options of resolutions and frame rates, and again, data rates that you can shoot. Even the codecs are more limited than what I had on the Canon. And then there's stuff like the fact that over HDMI, unless you're recording externally, you don't get face detection autofocus. The menu blacks out unless you do some ridiculously complicated wizardry. And overall, the HDMI options are just bad. And they give you micro HDMI instead of mini HDMI or full-size HDMI. I wouldn't expect full-size HDMI on a camera like this, but I feel like they could have at least given us mini HDMI. Also, the way they organize the ports on the cameras kind of sucks. They at least include lots of ports like HDMI, headphone, microphone, multi-USB-C, but at least on my A7R III, there are 3 separate doors. The headphone and microphone jacks aren't even in the same door, and it's just kind of a mess. And then there's their infamous menu systems. Now, in my opinion, they aren't actually that bad if you learn them, but they're not as good as some other competitors like Fuji or Canon. They have a lot in them, which is great, but they aren't organized that well, and you can't even use the touchscreen in the menu system. So there are a lot of great things about Sony, especially for photographers. But when it comes to video, they aren't always there. In my opinion, I think Sony is a great option for certain people. I respect why other people don't like them. I respect why other people like different brands. But for me, Sony was the best option.
It's recording.
Okay. Eke out the best the camera are programmable